my friends. Welcome to the kitchen counter. Cameraman Dale is behind the camera today, but we are excited to present to you a new feature on our channel and something we hope we're going to be able to continue called Meet Our Community. We are going to feature some fascinating people that watch our channel or that we've met throughout the lifetime of Las Vegas Inside and Out who have great stories to tell. So I cannot wait to introduce you to our very first guest. My friends, say hello to Karen Jean Hunt, one of my contemporaries. We just decided we were born in the same year, and we are going to call her KJ. She has an incredible story to tell you about world travels, the Peace Corps, military service, and what I find incredibly exciting is an archivist and librarian. Talk about a lifetime of accomplishments. But first, let's talk about Las Vegas. What is it about Las Vegas and how did we get connected?
Well, Las Vegas is important because it's one of my first travel adventures. So when I was 17 years old, I asked my mom, how much money would you give me if I went to the prom? And she gave me an amount and I said, can you give it to me in cash? And I took the money and I hopped on a Greyhound bus from Detroit, Michigan, and I traveled to Las Vegas to see the Osmonds at the Tropicana Hotel. And I turned 18 as the bus entered downtown Las Vegas. So Vegas for me is like homecoming. It's like the first big adventure that I had, and it was amazing. All these teenage girls at a major hotel casino in Las Vegas, and we just took it over for a 3-week period. And I loved every bit of it. So Vegas is always, part home for me because it's so important in my travel history.
What an introduction to this exciting town. And this is back in the era, even before the Midnight Idol was playing. I mean, this is pre-Wayne Newton.
Yeah, I remember they had spaces between the casinos, which you don't see anymore.
There's none anymore.
Yeah.
And you've been coming back ever since?
I've been coming back to Vegas for conferences. I was a librarian, and sometimes the American Library Association would host a convention in Vegas, so I would come for that. So, and then just to come because it's Vegas and you want to have a good time, I would come with friends to Las Vegas. So through the years, I have no idea how many times I've been to Vegas.
More than you can count.
Yeah, but this is my 50th. In July, it'll be my 50th anniversary of coming to Las Vegas.
From 74.
From 74 till now.
And ladies and gentlemen, I picked her up at the Tropicana today. So talk about coming full circle. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
All right, so let's back up a little bit. Let's go back to that little girl in Detroit and let's talk about the beginnings of what sent you on your life's journey.
I was, stereotypical inner city kid in Detroit. My mom was on welfare. We lived in Jeffries Projects, which is a housing project in Detroit, Michigan. There were 2 Brewster Projects. People may have heard because the Supremes came from Brewster's Projects. I'm from the other projects. And so we lived in one of the buildings that faced the John C. Lodge freeway. So growing up, even though we didn't have a car, I would see cars on the freeway and I would just think, where do people go? Like, where are they going to and from? And so I had a sense that I wanted to travel. And then as a young kid, you hear stories about Black writers who moved to Paris, whether it was Maya Angelou or James Baldwin. And so I knew there was a place sort of out there. And then 1963 happened. And we got word that the Beatles were going to play at Sullivan the following year. And I don't know where my mother got the money, but we begged her for a TV because we didn't have a television. Begged this poor woman for a TV. And she got us a TV for Christmas. The Beatles played Sullivan, and then I was hooked. Like I was going to go to England. And so my goal was in somehow, some way, I'm going to get out of Detroit and I'm going to travel.
And you planted that seed in yourself very early.
Yeah.
So when you turned 18, you came to Vegas, and it was very shortly afterward then that you decided to join the military, yes?
So I saw in the back a TV guide, which I would get every week and read cover to cover, a little blurb that said free medical, free dental, maybe $280 a month to join the military. And I filled it out. You didn't need a stamp, which was important. And I sent it in, and the big brown envelope came to the house. I filled out all the paperwork and went in, and the guy said, okay, come in, where you want to go? You want to go Navy? You want to go Air Force? What do you want to do? And I wanted Navy. And the Navy recruiter didn't get off the phone. And so the Air Force recruiter said, what are you doing? And I go, I'm waiting for the Navy guy. He goes, come here. And by the time the Navy guy was off the phone, I had been recruited to go
to the Air Force.
to go to the Air Force.
You were a fly girl.
So he's like, how old are you? And I was 17. I hadn't yet finished high school. He said, you have to finish high school. You have to turn 18. I can sign you in now, but we need a parent's signature. I called my mom, who happened to be home. She came up, and the guy had it all set out. He was going to explain to her what was, going on. And she came in and goes, your daughter wants to join the Air Force, but we need your signature. And she took the pen and she signed, and she started walking back towards the door. And she just turned to me and said, you're going to be home later, right? And I said, yeah. And she left.
Okay.
So I was signed up. So I weighed 83 pounds when I finished high school, and I had to weigh 97 pounds in order to go to basic training. And I got to 95 pounds February of 1975, and they took me with a 2-pound waiver. So I left for basic training March 12th of 1975.
That is just incredible. And you were stationed in California initially.
Yeah.
So it says here you were in Norton Air Force Base in San Bernardino.
Yep.
And you also had some interesting assignments in LA County, military funeral detail.
Yeah, when I got to base, you live in a dorm and you have to take all your meals at the cafeteria. But there was something called the Honor Guard. And if you joined the Honor Guard, because you were going to go do military funerals in Southern California, and sometimes you went to competitions, then they gave you money. You got a stipend for meals because you couldn't always be on base to take your meals. And I thought, well, that's great. So I signed up for that. And the guys had the rifles and they had the knives in it, and they would throw them, toss them. And, people really liked that. The females, we had sabers, and we would twirl them and throw them up in the air and catch them and do these movements. But when we weren't doing competitions, we did funerals. And so I did that the whole 5 years that I was in. And I loved it. You have such respect for the military and for what people give and the service that they put in. And so for me, that was like the highlight of my time in being in the service.
Wow, that is so moving. Stay tuned. We are going to talk about travel in just a moment. So Karen Jean told us that she had been bitten by the travel bug early, and that assignment in California sent you on your first overseas assignment.
So my first overseas assignment, I went to Okinawa, Japan, for 90 days, in like around 1979. And so I had done other travels with the military, but normally it had been stateside.
Yeah.
You do maneuvers and things. I came to Nellis, and things like that. But my first overseas trip, and so we stopped in Hawaii, which was very exciting. And then from Hawaii, we flew to Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines. And then we flew on to our base in Okinawa, Japan. And so after that, I was like, I wanted to travel really bad. But I got out of the military. They offered an assignment in Germany. But I really wanted to go to university. And one of the reasons I signed up to go in the military was to get the GI Bill.
GI Bill.
So I could go to college.
Sure.
So I did. So I went to university. And then from there, I went to grad school in Ohio, a school called Wright State.
Yeah, down in the western corner.
Yeah. And over the summer, I was working in Washington, D.C. on G and 15th. And the Live Aid concert happened. Mm-hmm. And so there was a famine in Ethiopia and all these singers came together. And so I watched it all weekend. And that Monday on my lunch break, I walked from G and 15th to the Peace Corps headquarters and I signed up for the Peace Corps. And that was like the summer of 85. And I left for Kenya October of 86.
This is an adventurer. This is a true adventure. 30 years old.
Yeah, yeah.
Thereabouts.
Yeah.
Okay. Kenya.
What'd
you do?
I taught English at a school. I was the first volunteer that school ever had. The way the system is set up, you do Harambee schools, and so the community comes together and they find a place for the school. They hire original teachers for the school, a headmaster. They try to get books. They try to get supplies for the kids to use.
Sure.
And those are the schools that normally get Peace Corps volunteers because they're going from the ground up. So I was the first volunteer there. The people in the village had not heard that there were African American Peace Corps volunteers.
So you were quite the novelty.
So I would get there and they would say, "Who are you?" And I would say, "I'm your Peace Corps volunteer." And they'd say, "No, you're not." And I would say, "Why not?" And they say, "Peace Corps volunteers are white and you look like us." And I would just tell them, it's going to be a long 2 years.
Get used to it.
Get used to it. They do breaks differently. They don't have summer breaks. They have more like year-long school, and they take a break in August and maybe another break in October, So you have like a month off. You could go to Mombasa. You could go take a bus to Lamu. I mean, you could just travel all around. And I did. I didn't have money to like leave Kenya. Mm-hmm. And go to other places, but I certainly had enough money. And I was close to Nairobi. I was only maybe 100K, 60 miles from Nairobi. So I could get to Nairobi and buy supplies at my school and, things like that. Food. I could get, probably better food than most volunteers could get because I had a, closer transportation to Nairobi than they did.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely fascinating. So I got to flip my notes here. All right, so after your stint in Kenya, you came home and decided to go back to school?
I came back and did the history track and I finished. I graduated like December of 89 and I moved to Washington, D.C. because my goal was I wanted to work at the National Archives. And so I applied and, you're waiting and then there's MLK Day and so everything's closed and you're getting so anxious, like, will I have a job? Won't I have a job? And I called the National Archives office in St. Louis and I said, can you look at my application? And the guy said, okay, let me pull it up. And he said, let me get this straight. So you're Black, you're female, you're a veteran, you served in the Peace Corps, you have graduate degrees. He said, ma'am, don't take this the wrong way. He said, if you had a Hispanic last name and a limp, they would make you the archivist of the United States. Don't worry, you'll hear from us. And so, indeed, I worked on Constitution, the main building in Washington, D.C., and I worked there for a year. I did the passenger list records when people wanted to know where their families came in, or I did census records, people trying to do genealogy, and we did Eastern Cherokee, people trying to prove that they were from the tribes that were Trail of Tears that were taken to Oklahoma. But it was a great experience.
Priceless. Absolutely.
It was wonderful, and I loved working there. And then from there, I decided I needed more records management experience, and so I took a job in Minnesota, and I worked for Northern States Power, and I was like the records manager for their old plant. And then I decided, I think I need a library degree. So I went to the University of Michigan, and I had to take my mom. She had Alzheimer's. And so I took my mom with me, and I knew I could do it for a year but I couldn't do it for 2. So I did my 2-year graduate degree in 11 months.
How is it that you ended up at Duke?
My first job out of school was at the College of William and Mary. I was very fortunate. I was very, very fortunate. It was a great experience. I was the assistant university archivist. And so you get to work under somebody in a school that old. They were celebrating their 300th anniversary at the time. And so it's a great place to sort of cut your teeth. After 3 years at William and Mary, I got my own shop. So I was director of special collections, the university archivist, and the archivist for the California State University system.
Wow,
and
that's prestigious.
Yeah, I did that.
That's a lot.
It was a lot.
Yeah.
So I did that for 6 years. And then my godson's mom said, they just opened your position at Duke. And I said, what are you talking about? And I looked at it, and it was a reopening. It was like a second search for director of the John Hope Franklin archives at Duke University. And John Hope Franklin is a historian. He wrote the book From Slavery to Freedom. It's used in most classrooms. And he was the first African-American chair at the University of Chicago's Department of History. There's a big name. And I didn't want to leave California. I loved California, but it's John Hope Franklin. So I applied. I was interviewed, and they offered the position. So in 2002, I left California. I went to Duke, and I was the head of the John Hope Franklin collection, it's an umbrella of all African American materials in special collections. And I was also the librarian for African American studies. And then the librarian for African studies, unfortunately, had to go through chemotherapy. And she said, can you take over African studies for the library? And I said, sure, of course I will. And unfortunately, she passed away. So then I had 3 jobs. I was director of the John Hope Franklin. I was the librarian for African American studies, and I was the librarian for African studies.
Which you are uniquely qualified for.
Yeah. So that was a good thing. And so travel came from that as well.
Okay. All right, let's stop right there. We'll come right back. And we are back with the last part of our interview with KJ. So, you retired from Duke in 2017, but you weren't done. What did you do after that?
I signed back up for the Peace Corps. And so
Yes, you did.
3 weeks after my retirement, I was in Yerevan, Armenia, an old Soviet country, also teaching English like I did when I was in Kenya. And I served there for 27 months. And I decided early on that even though I could get my own apartment, I was going to live the whole 2 years with a host family. So during the week, I ate what my family ate. I lived with my family. But on the weekends, if I wanted to go to Yerevan, I could go to Yerevan and go out and get Thai food or, get a burger, whatever I wanted to do. And then after that ended, I rejoined Peace Corps for the 3rd time. And I went.
She's in her 60s at this point, ladies and gentlemen. Just wanted to point that out.
And I did the full circle. I went to Ethiopia. So when I signed up for the Peace Corps after Live Aid, it's because there was a famine in Ethiopia.
Right.
And in my head, I sort of thought I would, go to Ethiopia. Of course, you're not going to go to Ethiopia when there's a famine because Peace Corps wasn't, still working there, but I went full circle. And so my 3rd time, I finally got to Ethiopia, and we ended up being there for 9 months. And then COVID happened, and we were evacuated from Ethiopia. So I came back stateside, and I was thinking I would do Peace Corps Reserve, which is like for former volunteers. And you just got a sense the world's not opening the way I thought it was. So I signed up for AmeriCorps, which is the domestic Peace Corps, and I took an assignment for the homeschool for the Sitka School District in Sitka, Alaska. And I did that for 2 years.
which is where we met up with Karen Jean over YouTube.
Yes.
This is where we finally converged.
Yeah.
When you were in Alaska,
Yeah.
and you sent me an apron from Sitka.
Yeah, from Sitka, Alaska. Yeah.
And she has been following us ever since. And amazingly, you have a couple tchotchkes from Las Vegas Inside and Out that you've actually taken with you on your world travels. I have no idea why, but our tchotchkes have been everywhere. So do you have any numbers, just to wrap things up? I saw on a recent post that you've been in 48 of the American states, right?
Yeah, I've been in 49. The last state that I need to go to is South Dakota, and I don't know how that's going to happen. Kevin Costner sold his casino in Deadwood, and that was the reason I was going to South Dakota, and that's been sold. But I have one more state to do, and I've been to 64 countries. And
ladies and gentlemen, that is an adventurous life. All right, so we cozied up to wrap things up. I want you to know that Karen Jean does a great job on Instagram of sharing all her adventures. She posts a lot of content of her world travels. It's really a lot of fun. So I'll put that contact info down in our description box in case you want to check out her adventures and follow her. I want to say thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Coming and being with us and telling us your story. We have never met before about an hour ago, except our online relationship, which has actually spanned several years already.
Yeah.
Thank you all for watching. We hope you enjoyed our first episode of Meet Our Community, and this is a shining example of the quality of people that we have got to meet by having this channel. Thank you so much, KJ, for being with us. We hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you guys again soon. Bye.